Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really delighted to have you join us for our annual Sir Bernard Crossland lecture. And I should tell you from the outset that we've actually had to change the lecture theatre to a bigger one because we ran out of space. This was so popular. It just shows you what a draw our guest speaker is this evening. And I offer a special thanks to tonight's keynote speaker, Dr Jayne Brady. Now, this lecture is hosted by our Queen's Chief Executives Club and Engineers Ireland in association with the Institute of Engineering and Technology. And Jane knows all these organisations very well. Now, the lecture is named in honour of our late colleague, Sir Bernard Crossland. These lectures started in 2001, and Sir Bernard played a key role in organising them right up until 2011, just before he died. Sir Bernard never fully retired, and his contribution to engineering, particularly here at Queen's, but also across our wider society, is still felt today. And I'd like to thank Jonathan Hagan, Chair of the Sir Bernard Crossland Lecture, Organising Committee, who's been in this committee since its inception. And I'd also like to thank the other committee members who served with them. Tonight, we're joined by many friends and colleagues of Sir Bernard, and that's testament both to his character and his career. I extend a warm welcome to his daughter, Marianne, who we're fortunate to have here with us this evening. Now, over the past 20 years, these lectures have played an important role in building a solid relationship between Queen's and industry, and in particular, engineering. As an institution, we're proud that Queen's makes a major contribution to the local economy. An independent report from London Economics has estimated the value of our economic impact, which is £3.2 billion each year. We also play a leading role in the Belfast Region City Deal, a fantastic development for innovation, a number of innovation centres set across Northern Ireland that will create thousands of new, highly skilled jobs in a knowledge economy with more than £220 million of new investment. Innovation centres include one in advanced manufacturing here at Queen's, and I'm sure that will resonate with much of our audience today. Now, Northern Ireland needs many skilled graduates. We were very pleased to meet Conor Murphy, the new Economy Minister today, and to hear about his plans for investing in our young people by extending the number of places in universities in Northern Ireland. But now I have to turn to our guest speaker, Dr Jayne Brady. Jane's head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service, the first woman in the role, and the first external appointment in its 100-year history. In this role, Jane is the most senior advisor to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister, as well as Secretary to the newly returned Northern Ireland Executive. Jane is a Queen's alumna. She's an engineer at heart, and her CV boasts an extensive board experience and a track record of success spanning blue-chip corporations, startups, and funding ecosystems. With over 20 years leadership experience, Jane's previous roles include Digital Innovation Commissioner, a partner in a venture capital firm, and co-founder of an award-winning artificial intelligence startup. She's deeply committed to delivering economic and social development through innovation. Her work's been recognised for services to the economy with an MBE and an honorary DSc in economics from Queen's in 2019. Jane also has a passion for supporting young people and was a counsellor for Childline and a board member for Young Enterprise NI. Jane, we're really honoured to have you join us tonight. So can I ask the audience to please join me in welcoming Jane to our lecture, Igniting Northern Ireland's Engineering Renaissance.
Good evening, everyone, and my thanks to Ian for that really warm welcome and that generous introduction. And it is especially a privilege and honour for me to be here delivering this year's Sir Bernard Crossland Lecture and to stand along the illustrious lineup of speakers who are participating across these few days, many of whom are individuals who have contributed to and inspired me in my own journey in engineering. My current role as head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service has given me opportunities to engage across government, business and civic leadership, and I am incredibly grateful for those privileges. But there is something about being amongst your peers. It is very setting that fanned into my flame my own passion for engineering that has come a sense of coming home. And it is so good that I recognise almost all of the audience that is here today, so thank you. My thanks to the Chief Executives Club and to Engineers Ireland for inviting me, and thank you to each of you for taking the time to be here this evening. I know that we had to move the venue to accommodate the numbers of you who wanted to attend. I am as humbled as I am encouraged by your interest and your support, and I hope I don't let you down. Tonight, I would like to talk about Northern Ireland's engineering heritage and the opportunities that I believe exist for igniting a revival of our engineering pedigree that can supercharge our economy, provide present and future generations with opportunity, and safeguard our environment. And I have to say, when I was answering the question of our own current crop of engineering graduates at One Elmwood earlier today, and I saw how young and fresh-faced they all looked, I thought that I am in danger of becoming part of our engineering heritage myself. But engineering is about connections, and I was quickly drawn by the tangible enthusiasm of our student engineers. They are a credit to those of you who teach them and who mentor them. And they will be the vanguard of any engineering renaissance that we may aspire to. So igniting that renaissance means investing in them. It is well documented that at the turn of the 20th century, Northern Ireland, and Belfast in particular, was a titan of the industrial era in Western Europe. We were giants of engineering, textiles, innovation, and manufacturing. And it is fitting that we use the word giant to describe the story of this place, though there is nothing mythical about this tale. It is said that Jonathan Swift drew inspiration from the Cave Hill when writing Gulliver's Travels because of how it resembled a sleeping giant. As a Belfast girl, growing up in the shadow of that giant, I had a passion for engineering and an ambition to use engineering to make things better. It was an ambition that led me as a 14-year-old to write a letter to the then Institution of Electrical Engineers to ask if I could become a member. That was 1986, which proved to be another dreadful year in the conflict that blighted our community for so long. The Belfast of that day was known for sectarianism rather than shipbuilding of the previous century. And for me, engineering and a job with opportunities offered the promises of a pathway out of that difficult past, and I assumed, therefore, out of here. The IEA graciously responded to my request by telling me that it would have to wait until I was 18 to become a member, and that in the meantime I should continue to pursue my ambition to become an engineer. I secured work placements as a 17-year-old in NIE Networks and the BBC. And one of the most catalytic milestones in my career came a year later when this university awarded me a scholarship to study electrical and electronic engineering. Queen's and its networks offered me fresh vistas and visions of where engineering could take me, and I began to plan how to get there. As a new QUB graduate, I secured my first job in Tokyo, again facilitated by this university, and then moved to Germany, before returning to Northern Ireland, where I became chair of the Younger Members IET, chair later of the senior section of the IET, and delighted to become a fellow of the IET and the Irish Academy of Engineering. My career then moved into venture capital, and more recently I've had the privilege of sitting on the UK government's Innovation Expert Group and was appointed Entrepreneurial Expert Advisor for the University of Oxford in 2020. So much of my career in technology has found itself at those pioneering inflection points of disruption. In Japan, it was the work on the first mobile phone. In Nortel, it was the first World Wide Web and the first optical network. In Intune, it was the first data-led service in Verizon with that plucky startup Netflix. And venture capital broadened my portfolio from working in some of those paradigm-shifting technologies to spotting opportunities and investing in the potential of others, even to the point of co-founding a startup. It's culminated in becoming the first woman head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service and its first external appointment in the role in the service's history. The 14-year-old Jayne Brady from the Waterworks, who precociously wrote to the IEA, could never have imagined the opportunities that lay ahead. Perhaps subconsciously, I just wanted something substantive that I could point to, knowing that as a teenager girl from North Belfast, I could belong as an engineer. And that simultaneously engineering could make a positive difference to the place where I belong. Whatever the psychoanalysis, the common threads running throughout each stage of my career journey have been seeing and believing in the potential that exists, finding inspirational colleagues in the field who will invest in that potential, and finding the energy, courage, and sometimes even the risk to nurture potential. That is my story, but alongside it is a much greater story of Northern Ireland's engineering renaissance. For me, igniting an engineering renaissance means reminding ourselves of what we once were capable of as a way to recapture that spirit that once characterised and still does characterise this place. That means thinking big, fearlessly leading the way, even in global terms. The complexity and scale of the task cannot be understated, but I believe the rewards for all of us, for everyone living here, are worth the effort. We must never forget we have innovation in our DNA. We now have access to technology that was unthinkable only a decade ago, and there is no doubt that the rapid pace of technological change will not slow down anytime soon. We must step up and channel instinctive industrial innovation that is deep in our makeup to solve global problems. We must never underestimate the power of hope and opportunity. As we look to the future, we can draw confidence from the wealth of industrial heritage in our wake. This is a small place, but we have the potential to be a major player in important fields. And as I mentioned, at the beginning of the 20th century, these shores were renowned as a giant of enterprise and engineering. The world trusted us with its ambitions in science, in technology, and in developing the tools for a better connected global village. And with good reason, for the engineering and innovation bloodline of this place is a strong one. Harry Ferguson from County Down gave us the modern tractor in 1936. Sir James Martin from Crossland invented the ejector seat. Frank Pantridge gave us a portable defibrillator in 1965. Astrophysicist Dame Jocelyn Bell discovered pulsars in the 1960s. And aviation pioneer Lillian Bland built and flew her own plane, the first woman ever to do so. In the drawing offices of Belfast Harbour, the plans for the Titanic were drawn. Down the slipway, we built the largest dry dock in anticipation of building the largest ship in the world. That was the scale of our ambition. And the Silent Valley Reservoir, when it was built in 1923, was a monumental feat of civil engineering, and over a century later, it still stands tall, quenching Belfast's thirst with over 3 billion gallons of water and counting. This is our engineering pedigree. And as we trace the annals of that heritage, we encounter a story that is much more than simply structures and circuits. It's a saga of resilience, adaptability, and commitment to progress, a chronicle of engineers who dared to disrupt, who harnessed nature's forces, and quite literally lit up a region. The end of the industrial age and the decades of conflict here changed the perception for some people, but it did not change our ambition nor our potential. Indeed, our entrepreneurs and engineers in the business community kept delivering the best of their ability during those years. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement brought a new era of peace, and the dividends of that peace became the gateway to an unprecedented economic frontier. The 1998 was itself a giant ambition for our people and our future. It was a peace that, as has been highlighted many times over the past year, was far from inevitable. It had to be carefully, courageously, and sacrificially engineered by leaders and political pioneers who refused to give up on their conviction that there was a better story for people living here. And what they produced told a story to the next generation of what was possible and invited them to take up the mantle of realising the possible. Realising the possible has delivered so much more than an end to our troubled past. In many ways, it has ushered a social and economic revival. This is often our untold story. Almost 26 years on from the agreement, we are a vibrant, innovative and forward-looking society, alive with art, commerce and opportunities for investment. Since 1998, our well-being rates are among the highest in Europe. We've created globally renowned companies and audacious startups. We have developed our own vibrant tech sector with established world-class technology, billion-dollar companies such as Canis and First Derivatives, and disruptive startups such as Catagen, Fion and Artemis. Engineering graduates no longer need to leave to pursue even the most bold career ambitions. Northern Ireland has blossomed as an investment venue of choice with a global reputation as a trusted business partner who brings enormous value to those who work with us. We are ranked number 1 for FDI strategy for mid-sized regions, and Belfast was ranked as the number 1 small city in UK for doing business. We have seen the largest private sector growth in UK regions, expanding by 36% since 1998. We're home to more than 1,200 international companies, of which 70% reinvest. Belfast is in the top 3 fintech locations of the future after London and Singapore. We have a global reputation as a hub for leading-edge technologies, particularly in emerging sectors such as low-carbon technologies and cybersecurity. We are the number 1 international investment destination for US cybersecurity firms. 1 in 5 of computers across the world contains parts made by Seagate Technologies in Northern Ireland, and 40% of the world's material handling equipment is made in the region, much of it by Terex. We also are the UK's only aircraft design, manufacture and build test facility in Spirit's Air Systems. And last year, almost 50% of all electricity consumed was from clean energy, with huge potential for offshore, solar, green hydrogen and biomethane. And we have one of the youngest populations in Europe, with 50% under 40 years of age, resilient, results-driven and loyal, less than 3% seeking new jobs, the lowest in the UK. And we boast a talent pool pipeline delivered by our HE and FE colleges and universities, of which QUB ranks number 1 in the UK for entrepreneurship. And if that wasn't impressive enough, we gave the world not only giants, but dragons via Game of Thrones and Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, in the studios across the city, we can help with How to Train Your Dragon, just some of our globally loved productions to emerge from our thriving screen and film industry. We are often too quick to forget and underplay just how far we have come in a relatively short space of time. But the fact is that we have all the material we need for igniting an engineering renaissance in this place. In fact, there are plenty of reasons to believe that that renaissance has already begun. That said, we must not ignore or dismiss the fact that we still have major challenges. While we must support an innovative growth environment, this must reach beyond those people and places that have benefited from past growth. We need to ensure that innovation-led economic resurgence reaches the people and places that have not yet seen the light from our dawn of peace. Perhaps the most deeply rooted challenge is in reaching the disproportionately high numbers of people recorded as economically inactive. But in addition to practical concerns about how much talent and brain power we are missing out on, there is also a moral cause to consider. Everyone deserves the opportunity to thrive. We must all recognise that a scenario where we have by far the fewest number of people with disabilities in the workforce compared to the UK average is not acceptable. We cannot succeed if we do not tap into people's talents and skills to boost our future economy. Focusing solely on prosperity is not enough. That focus needs to dovetail with how we care for our planet and for our people. If an engineering renaissance is to fulfil its potential, then we must ensure that it brings with it transformative opportunities for those who have not seen that benefit, for women, for people with disabilities, and those from disadvantaged areas, in a way that addresses our need for sustainable economic activity and a higher standard of living for all of us. An engineering-led renaissance will not be a success unless it has an impact across this region and for all of our people. I believe we have a golden chance to leverage our expertise and passion for engineering and for innovation to deliver lasting generational transformation here. There is much work to be done. However, today we are a vibrant, innovative and forward-looking place that represents a clear case for investment. To capitalise on this, we need to take a collaborative approach involving government, the wider public and private sectors, and of course academia. We need everyone to be part of a joint effort, prioritising innovation and playing their part in delivering opportunities for all of our society. And we have some fundamentals in place to support that transformations. Universities are a core part of national and regional economic infrastructure, particularly as the main providers of the highly skilled individuals businesses need to succeed. We must balance current economic performance and potential with the genuine challenges we face. Climate change is an urgent priority, and we need the skills of engineers to find solutions that will safeguard our environment for future generations. Finding better ways for industry, academia and public policy to work together on these solutions will be vital to progress. As we turn to look to the future, I am full of hope and optimism at the potential that exists here. There is a great deal of evidence to show that the engineering renaissance has begun. Engineers are the driving force behind the successful companies here in the fields of aerospace and defence, materials handling, constructions, life and health sciences, using innovative technologies such as nanotechnology, photonics and precision engineering. Capability in advanced manufacturing material engineering will provide export opportunities in specialist components to meet the growing hydrogen infrastructure demand, both here in the UK and across the EU. But we must recognise that if we are to grow in these fields, we must ensure that we have the right mix of skills at the right level to make the most of these opportunities and to meet economic demand. Feedback from industry has highlighted a skills shortage within the engineering sector, which can be attributed in part to an ageing workforce and a lack of educational and awareness concerning engineering among young people. There is also a lack of women across the engineering sector. We will never have enough engineers if we continue to see relatively few women training as engineers. These are challenges we must meet, and part of the solution means recognising that the choices made in education that have traditionally been based on gender must be disrupted to make full use of all our resources and initiatives, such as the Women into Industry networks across our further education sector, should be welcomed and built upon. Naturally, an engineering renaissance will require a supply of engineers, and this is where our universities and further education colleges will fill the gaps in education and training. The most recent Skills Barometer update shows that the most severe predicted annual undersupply of subjects in terms of meeting the economy's needs is in STEM areas, particularly in engineering and technology. Whilst all here today will be aware of the sterling work done by the engineering faculty here at Queen's, I'm also consistently impressed by the work undertaken by our further education colleges in helping meet this demand. Analysis shows that there is currently a high level of demand within the economy to provide people with skills that our FE colleges are particularly well placed to deliver. And at degree and postgraduate levels, we need a continuing flow of engineering graduates to underpin and take forward the growth of the sector. This is a challenging area, and it is essential that the whole of the skills pipeline plays its part, with subjects in science, technology, engineering and maths being recognised when children make subject choices at school as offering the best opportunities for their future. Perhaps the best known of our innovative engineering legacy is the maritime sector. There are examples of this enduring with several projects at various stages of development. For example, the Belfast Maritime Consortium, led by Artemis Technologies, won a £33 million UK innovation grant to develop zero-emissions ferries in Belfast, which will revolutionise the future of maritime transport. The consortium aims to produce the world's first autonomously controlled electric hydrofoiling ferry. The e-foiler system combines ultra-high-density electric propulsion from Formula One racing with autonomously controlled carbon fibre hydrofoils used in the America's Cup sailing competitions. It will provide one of the first solutions for the early adoption of high-speed, zero-emissions maritime transport. Alongside this technical information, our expert academic research base is of foundational importance. Without the research that is undertaken, we would not be able to develop the innovations across the economy that will lead us to growth. Standouts include the Centre for Advanced Sustainable Energy and the Northern Ireland Advanced Composites and Engineering Centre at Queen's, the Hydrogen Safety Engineering and Research Centre at Ulster University. It is this public, private and academic collaboration that is key to unlocking our great potential, and the work of our engineers is at the very core of this. Right now, we are uniquely positioned to become a leader in hydrogen deployment and technology innovation. Institutions such as Queen's, Ulster University, Belfast Met and the North Region College are leading the way in advanced manufacturing techniques, robotics and hydrogen training and safety. We have the potential to become a centre of global excellence with local production of green hydrogen via electrolysis, export of green hydrogen, e-fuel for transport, and decarbonisation of the gas network. And capability in advanced manufacturing, materials engineering provides export opportunities in specialist components in the growing hydrogen infrastructure demand across the UK and EU. In terms of decarbonisation of transport, we already have market-leading companies in bus and maritime transport decarbonisation, along with innovators in compliant fuel tank design and testing. The purchase and operation of TransLink of over 20 hydrogen fuel cell buses from Ballymena-based Wrightbus is a key source of early demand to simulate production. This is in addition to more than 100 electric buses TransLink already has in operation. We only have these opportunities because of engineers seeking innovative solutions and harnessing new technologies. And this is an excellent example of the kind of approach our economy needs if we are to meet our ambitions for future growth. Which brings me back full circle to where I started my address to you this evening. After all we have been through the last half century or so, there is, I believe, the opportunity to make what was thought to be impossible possible. Conditions are ripe for innovation, success and transformation. We have travelled a huge journey as a society, and our economy has now undergone fundamental changes and is sought to modernise and look to the future. We have already built a reputation as a great place to do business. Our people have long been regarded rightly as our greatest asset, and we have a global profile as a hub for leading-edge technologies in emerging sectors. But we must do more to bring this potential to fruition. We must focus on our existing or potential areas of strengths, whether this is in the hydrogen sector, advanced materials, fintech, life and health sciences, matching the right skills with research and development and with innovation. We must look to our past successes in engineering, not as footnotes in the past, but as an inspiration for our future. Our past tells us what is possible, and we can achieve as much, if not more, in the future. We can learn the lessons of history too. We can ensure that workers are safe as they undertake the new and exciting work of building our future. We can also ensure that this kind of quality work is available to everyone in our society, and that engineers lead by providing opportunities for everyone here. We can support innovation in a targeted way to deliver growth, but we must also engage more of our people and places as part of that process. Whether this means bringing more girls and women into the engineering sector or supporting people with disabilities to enter the labour market, it is essential that we improve people's living conditions at the same time as overall growth is delivered. Engineers and engineering were the driving force behind the unprecedented growth experienced in this part of the world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And it is engineers and engineering that have the potential to be the driving force behind our future economic success in modern fields. It is up to us, to all of us, to ensure that we create the conditions for engineering to deliver on that potential. And success in this work, like our peace, is not inevitable. It will be realised in proportion to the leadership and vision we cultivate in places like this room. We need leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and engineers willing and empowered to take us into that future, whatever challenges it may face. To find the possible in what may sometimes appear the impossible. Leaders who believe what Senator George Mitchell reflected upon the agreement when he was here in April last. When you approved this agreement, you were talking to the whole world. This is an agreement not just for the past, but an agreement to initiate the future, not just here, but everywhere. In closing, I would like to leave you with the words of one of our great storytellers and Pulitzer Prize winner, Paul Muldoon, who beautifully captures our spirit of the possibility in this stanza from Belfast hymn. For if the future's less than clear, that won't leave us nonplussed. It's not our style to live in fear of what's in store for us. Our shipyard workers packed their gear and a piece in a box, but now it's peace we've engineered and christened in the docks. The spirit of those men of steel and grey-eyed wives and daughters will keep us on an even keel through the uncharted waters. For we steer by the northern star, however far we roam, that river mouth near our sandbar will signal we have come home. To some, igniting Northern Ireland's engineering renaissance and realising the exciting economic potential that comes with it may seem like a moonshot. But for a people who, in Muldoon's words, have already engineered peace, surely a moonshot like this is a giant we should not fear. And to achieve it, we may need to go back to the future and find in the annals of our engineering past a great commission to our engineering future. For in the tales of silent valleys and sleeping giants, we find the essence of Northern Ireland, an indomitable giant spirit for engineering progress, brick by brick, wire by wire, invention by invention, dream by dream. Thank you.
So, good evening, everyone. I suppose I need to start by first of all saying thank you so much, Jayne, for that talk. I have to admit I got a bit absorbed in it and forgot I had the job to come up and do afterwards. But that was how inspired and I think on the hook we all are sitting listening to you here. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Malone. I am hosting this evening's Q&A and on tonight's lecture with Jayne. So I am a past IET NI chair here for Northern Ireland. And
I think everyone is.
Well, I was about to make that point in a second. And I'm currently the CCUK chair for the IET, which is part of the IET's governance body and looking after all of the local networks across Northern Ireland. But as Jayne has rightly pointed out, I'm not the only past IET NI chair here. Not only on the stage, but also this evening. You have brought everybody out of hibernation somehow this evening, Jayne, and it's great to see the faces here. And that's actually how we first met in terms of your role as the IET&I chair. I think it was in 2013 when you came on board, and I know we worked very closely then. I have to admit, so I'm going to get into a little bit of a fangirl moment, that since your appointment, I feel a bit more like Buddy the Elf, and that I see you on stage and everything, and I'm kind of elbowing the person beside me like, I know her. And there's probably a few of us in the room who feel like that since your appointment and seeing all of the things that you have been doing over the last number of years. So maybe on that, and kind of get into some of the questions. We have had a number of questions submitted in advance for this evening, so thank you very much to everyone who did that. But one of the kind of ones that keeps coming up, and is also my own burning question, and I'm sure the same for some of us here, is, you know, how has your education in engineering prepared you for the role as the head of civil service, and what made you take that leap? You know, that leap from private sector, from engineering day in, day out, and I know it was said, you know, engineering is at your heart, and I think all of us in the room here are from an engineering background can resonate with that. But what made you take that leap then, Jane?
Okay, well, I'll start with the taking the leap. And actually, it's I know that Sir Ian knows this story, but I had a couple of nice, great, career that I've loved. But I got an MBA in 2018. It kind of was new to me, and I thought, you know, not really deserving. And then 2019, I think Karen's maybe in the room somewhere, but I think nominated me for honorary doctorate from Queen's, and I was doing my research for that, and it was to my engineering class, and I graduated in 95. And I had to do the kind of the honorific kind of speech thing of, you know, nobody was listening because they all wanted to go to the pub with their, you know, their friends afterwards. But what would you do to your graduating self? And it was, I guess at that stage I talked about three things. One was to tune into the things that really give you energy, that you love, you know, the things that you know that you have your capability in, but that are based on your value-based system, and not to settle for something that wasn't really driving you and you were feeling that you were making an impact with. Second was to take some risks and, you know, not to be afraid to back yourself. And the third was actually to be a decent person, be kind to people. And then I thought afterwards, nobody was listening to me apart from possibly my children, probably not, in the audience, and my husband. I thought, like, but I'm not really doing that myself. I'm trying to get these children. And I did some of the stats of that group. And actually there was, when I was in university, there was 10% of the class were women, and it was about the same. And I thought things haven't really changed, and, you know, you're kind of complaining and you point up the hill and stuff. So I thought, well, maybe I should take my own medicine and maybe look for a job. So I'd finished investment in a fund I was in, was about to go into a new commitment with a new fund, and I thought, well, actually, maybe this is the time that I should think about looking towards if I can do something helpful in the public sector. So I actually resigned then with no job to go to, but I had 6 months' notice. So I then looked towards applying for a number of different roles, and I took a role as Digital Innovation Commissioner, which then worked in the City Deal, and I've got Liam, his here in the audience as well. So pleasure of working with some brilliant individuals in the City Deal, developing the innovation strategy for Northern Ireland. And I guess investing in Northern Ireland Venture and then looking at the innovation, you'll see it all around, how brilliant Northern Ireland is, how much potential we have. And I guess my thought was, to actually deliver that, you need government working with you to support that, and you can't really continually kind of be around the edges if you feel that you have something valuable. So the job came up and I applied, never truly thinking that this could be where I ended up. And here I am, and I have to say it is not just the privilege of my life to have this job, but it is such. Every day I get up and I'm energised by going in to try and make a difference in such a small way. Like, the people in this room are heroes. I saw Steve Orr crawling in late there as well. But people who have gone out to actually make that difference. And I think to the point about engineering, so we have lots of people in civil service, 23,000 people, who don't come external. So we have plenty of people who keep me writing, stop me making a mess of things. But actually engineers, I guess, they spot opportunities. They also can know how to qualify a problem, and then they give solutions. And I think part of the public sector is actually not just analysing where we are, but actually how can we look towards those opportunities and give solutions? Because my job is to give advice. What's my advice to an incoming executive? What are our big structural issues, which I covered on, that we need to address? But those are also opportunities. So engineers for me are solutions focused. And I think some of this is a movement. I know, delighted John Healy's here, who Momentum, I think I was on the board of 2013. 2013 I was doing the G8 innovation debate. We up on the stage with David Sterling. But actually people who are, you know, it's not just one person, we all need to step up, and you all know the potential of this place, and it can't be done with one person, but it can be done with a movement. So that's why I'm still here.
Well, I think we're all very grateful for that. I know, coming through engineering in terms of education and stuff, I think we all think there needs to be an engineer making these decisions. There needs to be an engineer advising this. So I'm sure we're all in the room sitting, great, this is...
There needs to be an executive making decisions, is my view. But anyway.
So in your talk this evening, you talked a number of times in terms of the skills shortage within engineering. And I suppose for me, actually, I remember hearing that whenever I was being recruited into the sector, after I had kind of come to Queen's myself. And it doesn't seem like that has changed. Yeah. You talked in terms of needing more diversity within the sector as well. And that's not just, as you said, with females, but also with those from different backgrounds, people who's just economically inactive. So how can we do that? What does that look like? And, even for those of us in the room who are from industry and from academia, from public and private sector, what do we all need to start doing to finally crack this?
Yeah. So I think I've come on a journey of that from over my career. I guess I believed, and I don't know yourself, Karen, but there was no barriers to me as a real woman, and there was nothing that was held back in. So I guess my thoughts were, communicate and market with it, and then the rising, and I spoke to some of the students earlier, the rising tide will lift all boats, and you'll get to a certain level, and it'll all become eureka moment, and you have the floodgates where those are. And I think that's not the case, actually. So I think there's a difference between equality of opportunity, which people in underrepresented groups have largely, and equity of opportunity. So it's and that's from those groups who are underrepresented. If you are from a low kind of, if you're brought up in some socioeconomic conditions where you don't have a desk in your room, the ability to actually get into a good degree or get A levels, those barriers are kind of insurmountable. In those areas, people with disabilities, the access to them just because they have equal opportunities, and then with women. So I think you need to have a focused aspect on removing the barriers to engagement within those sectors. You need to intervene to address that, and that I would take that regionally as well. There's difference and we see it, we have the data, we have the analysis, we know that what we've been doing hasn't really been working. So we need to have an interventionist approach to actually. The system is designed with a certain demographic in mind, and I find that actually in venture capital it's designed with almost a West Coast of America, young male kind of demographic in mind. It's not designed with a demographic that is inclusive to everyone to allow them to do that. So I think there's a role there for policy, actually, for policymakers to intentionally provide frameworks. There's amazing things that have been done, and actually getting so heartened by John in his role, but that John led in terms of work he did in Allstate with those who were underrepresented, the ladies who launched, which was, you were always the only man on stage. We missed you this year, John. But actually you need to provide pathways and need to understand those barriers. And I think that's a job for us all to do and to recognise those.
Absolutely. Well, since you seem to know everyone in the audience, it's probably about time that we open up to some questions from the audience this evening. We will keep it on topic, folks. We're not here tonight for politics. We are here to talk about engineering. So look, if there are any questions from the audience, if anybody wants to put their hand up, I think there will be a couple of roving mics. Oh, I see one up at the back here. So maybe if you could just introduce yourself and why you're here, your background, before your question, please.
Yeah. Hi there. I'm Andy Frew, Technical Innovation Manager at the Housing Executive. I think you can do a lot of decarbonisation with existing technologies and existing IP, some heavy metals, some copper wires and steel pipes and all the rest. Can you think of, is there a lot of innovation to be done in terms of accelerating the transition to zero carbon, actually?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the which is a phenomenal organisation, the largest landlord for social housing in Europe. And Grania was a fellow commissioner when she was Resiliency Commissioner, as I was Innovation Commissioner. She's the Chief Executive of Housing Executive. What we talked, and I guess looking towards some of those innovations, that I think we talked about how things need to be joined up to deliver these. we don't have enough funding to be single-threaded and those don't work. But one of the initiatives we looked at with the housing executive was the retrofitting of housing. When we obviously cost of living crisis and the impact of the energy crisis, particularly for those who are most vulnerable, again, you look towards our resilience. We have the highest levels of fuel poverty in Northern Ireland, big dependency on oil versus gas, which has its own issues. And one of the ways that we looked to try to be more innovative regarding that was, is there a way that we can actually, rather than giving funding, look towards a retrofitting for insulation for those houses, which actually then provides a longer term, lower energy type solution. It also stimulates the market from an economic perspective, so those more joined up. And I think increasingly those are the type of things that we're going to have to look at. We're also, I guess, and this will be for ministers to decide, but as part of an ongoing executive, to understand, do we need to provide some level of seed funding, and using some of the funding capital in the acknowledgement that some of those earlier technologies are higher risk. I saw Sarah here and the brilliant work that's been done with the hydrolyzers, and Sarah knows more than anyone with the lack of funding that we have in this system. But actually, how do you seed that hydrolyzers to create the oxygen for the Northern Ireland water, but also the hydrogen for the bus fleets? So more consciously, we need to kind of invest in those areas, but also make sure they're joined up across the service.
Thank you very much for your question. I must admit, I'm from the power sector myself, so I panicked for a second. It was directed to me. So I'm really glad that Jayne fielded that one instead. So look, is there any other questions from our audience? A minute. Roger, just down at the front here. Jayne and I are watching with sympathy coming down those steps and heels.
Cheers. It's Roger Woods. I'm the Dean of Research in the Engineering and Physical Science faculty. You mentioned about the entrepreneurship. You've quoted many good examples. And you also talked about being in California. And I think there's been a lot of good work, as you referred to, with Steve Orr and his team in the Science Park. We've obviously done some spin-offs in both universities and also some undergraduate teaching. But when you go to California, it's endemic in terms of the attitude. And I think that's where we need to go to. So I was just wondering in terms of what advice or what type of things you think we should put in place so that entrepreneurship and celebrating failure, which we're negative on failure, but actually failure is a part of going towards success. So how do we change the culture?
Thank you, Roger. And I guess I was speaking again to some of the students earlier. I think the fear of failure, it's a very Northern Irish thing, but actually 25 years ago when we had very high unemployment, the fear of failure maybe meant you didn't have a job, so there was some. But actually, I think what we have now is an ecosystem where, a graduate leaving engineering now has any number of choices of jobs if they're good in the technology sector. So we've created an ecosystem where there is an environment where taking risks can be part of that. And I think that's to do with the ecosystem that's created, the stuff that Steve's done, the stuff that Brian, I don't know if Brian's here, Brian McCall, in the iCure labs about how you actually develop and lever those. I think a lot of it's about connecting, and I know work that Steve has done with MIT and with Boston in terms of creating those aspirational links. And I guess some of it is nudging a culture where you can show different pathways to what's been done before. But I think, in the last 10 years, the level of transformation we have seen in that ecosystem from an entrepreneurial is unfounded. And I think some of the areas, of course, needs to be intervention at a government level, because that early seed capital, whether that's via universities funding those early stage researchers, or if it's Innovate UK, which takes that early stage, is a really kind of key pillar of doing that. So it's not just about the culture, it's actually providing the funding platforms. And I think that government has a role, and public sector funding has a role to do that. But equally, it's about looking externally and looking outwardly and creating those links and emulating that behaviour elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It was similar to one of the questions that had been submitted, actually, does our Northern Ireland mindset where we kind of play down things and, we're probably a bit humble as a nation. Listening to you earlier, I don't think we often sit back and reflect on the success that is here. So, just in terms of that question, what do we need to change in this room, but in the sector and in Northern Ireland in terms of that mindset to get our engineering renaissance continuing?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is backing yourself and having the confidence. When I went and worked in Japan and then Germany and then in North America, the kind of view was that these were the superpowers of engineering. But we all know that we are as good and better in many cases in those areas. So there's the area of backing themselves. And I think that is in line with taking risk as well. So we had some of the most senior investors that Joe Kennedy brought to these islands just in October of last year. And some of them we had on stage, and we purposely had kind of our entrepreneurs on stage as well, alongside kind of the more Indigenous presence. But there was the Tim McSweeney from Liberty Mutual. But they were saying that they were most impactful. They couldn't believe, and it was most impactful few days of their lives. So I think there's a role that we need to do to showcase that, provide the pathways and opportunities. But I guess that relentless focus on taking those opportunities as well. I think the work Invest Now will be a critical role, and I know that the Minister has reset very clearly the focus on the support for that Indigenous companies, and EI have, there's much to learn from what they have done to support that innovation. Of course, that's in the context of our FDI are critically important. This is about creating kind of clusters of excellence. You need, I was, and colleagues from Nortel's investment as it was standard 25 years ago created an ecosystem, as did BT, which actually, although the company is no longer there, but actually the people who seeded that went into skillset and worked and were part of kind of some of its cybersecurity stories. So just creating that clusters of expertise and getting that balance right will be really critical and important.
Excellent. And then following in your footsteps in terms of trailblazing and making sure that we kind of are role models and lead from the front. So just see if there are any further questions. I think there was one up at the back. Oh, you're going to not forgive me for sending you up to the back. Oh, we have someone up behind you, Bill.
Thank you. Bill Connor from Sentinus. Jane, just like to say thank you for a really inspirational presentation. When you hear all of the achievements that have gone on in the past and what is going on in the future, when you hear it listed like that, it is really impressive. Your own journey has been really impressive as well, so thank you for that. In regards to the talent pipeline, which we touched on a couple of times and Karen mentioned as well, my own organisation engages young people from the age of 4 right through to 16, 17 in interactive problem-solving activities in the STEM subjects. Will the executive going forward have any focus on engaging young people? The research shows that if we haven't engaged them and exposed them to science and engineering before the age of 11, it's actually very difficult to then attract them into the sector after that. My own organisation has extreme difficulty in accessing any government funding for this activity at the moment. So will the executive going forward have any focus on that?
So, happily, we have an executive who will make the policy decisions on that. And I guess I'm not going to, the budget implications are very well rehearsed. I guess the advice that I have given as policy advisor to the executive is that we need kind of a 3-stage approach. We need to address the reality of the stabilisation. Kind of some of our structures have had structural harm done to them because of the implications of the budget, so they need to be stabilised. The public sector pays part of that. We need to look at transformation of services. Waitiness, special education needs unacceptable, and actually will take and consume the entirety of our budget if that's not addressed. But the third area is what are our big long-term structural issues that Northern Ireland have? One of those is achieving our net zero targets. We have legal obligations, as well as it being, of course, the right thing to do. Those are very big challenges. One of those is looking towards then our ultimate productivity elements and where we can drive that. And I know productivity is an area of focus for the economy minister, but with the acknowledgement that those things are cross-cutting and you cannot address the issues you've addressed, which fundamentally underpin productivity, if you just focus in Department for Economy. So the need to have a cross departmental focus to make sure that we're joining up our systems. And, we've got, I guess, FE and HE, as well as our schools, providing some of those provisions as well. So ultimately, that will be for ministers to devise. I would say that what I've heard from those ministers is a focus in terms of a coherence of where they are in terms of their key priorities, of which delivering on that prosperity agenda is, and they're as well informed as they can be. I'd say the third area that the ministers have been concerned in looking at, and you've heard them talking about childcare, and there's childcare from an economic perspective, but there's also childcare as an intervention to provide support in a nurturing environment for perhaps cohorts of individuals who haven't had that as well, at that long-term strategy. So those are the key priorities that executive are identifying at this stage. But the funding aspect, I'm on the board of Young Enterprise, and the funding was cut for the funding was cut for many hugely valuable organisations. Now it'll be for ministers to decide how they reskew that funding, and have benefited from Sentinel's programmes in my past as well. So the funding is a really significant issue. What our proposal is, you cannot just cut off all the long-term strategic aspects just to address that fundamental crisis that is in hand, but it is a very challenging position.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And I think there was a mention earlier around additional places. Was it at university, or I think it was mentioned in the talk? Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I know that there was a meeting. I won't pre-discuss the meeting that Ian had with Conor Murphy, the Minister for the Economy, earlier regarding those places. I think there's some really good examples of where the reskilling programme has provided opportunities with areas in the city deals. We led with the Digital Futures campaign about how we can rapidly reskill those provisions. I know, for example, Bank of America invested along with its other delegation to provide those reskilling opportunities as well. But again, those are, I guess, the critical aspects of how we bring those together to meet the need. We're at, in a very positive context, almost full employment. We have the lowest unemployment levels in these islands. However, we do have a skills gap, and that's what all our industry players will give us. So we need to know how we can fulfil that as well.
Excellent. So we probably have time for one last question. I think there was a hand just at...
Thank you. So my name is Emil, and I'm the founder of a small startup of 3D scanning and spatial data. I have a question, as from what I've seen, the title of today's presentation is about the fourth industrial revolution, actually, in the engineering sector. So as Northern Ireland has a, is quite a small player in the industry, what would be, or is already, competitive advantage in today's global reality for Northern Ireland from the engineering perspective, comparing this with cybersecurity or even fintech. So fintech and cybersecurity, we have plenty of talent, like a big pool of talent here. But what about engineering, and how to scale this? Because if there's no ways in which this can be scaled, the talent just is just kind of directed towards the academic world. But what after that? Because that's when the big unicorns are born, from what I know. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's a really good question, and I think that talks, I guess, to we're a really small economy, so we need to focus where we have a competitive advantage. We cannot spread the jam, or we cannot fool ourselves to think we are masters at everything. So towards those areas which are really clearly understood, cyber, number one, US cyber, perhaps there's an opportunity. There's some great companies like Anchor, but fostering those more Indigenous companies in those sectors. But there are a number, so and those were the foundation of the investment in the city deals. So in addition to growing those clusters, but how do we invest in the research areas? So the Belfast Region City Deal invested in the advanced manufacturing, which is a key area of strength for Northern Ireland. 40% of our screening and crushing materials comes from Mid-Ulster, very heavy engineering. We have our photonics research here in Queen's from the Anson Lab, and our photonic corridor between Seagate, very high complexity, high technology aspects, bringing into our indigenous companies like Causeway Sensors and other organisations across that culture. So I think it's the area to focus. So I would say those are in advanced manufacturing, particularly in the areas of photonics and our materials handling. In life and health sciences, in some specific areas, we have excellence in those skills in the digital area, and to focus on those particular areas. Those need to be backed with investment in terms of R&D and commercialisation. So the city and growth deals are aligned to back the areas that we have investment in. Indeed, the investment that we've had, I mentioned there from Artemis, those have been identified by the UK government as our strength in places. Where is the strength in these places? That has been in photonics with the Smart Nano project from Seagate and Causeway and Cerdan, and then also in the maritime sector and that advanced engineering, which is Artemis, but many other clusters. And I guess Artemis particularly a really interesting example in that it provides pathways for all different variants, very high-tech, very innovation-focused, but pathways from apprenticeship level, and working with Belfast Met on that. I think probably one of the largest organisations in terms of funding and alumni from Queen's is Cadigan, who've phenomenal investment through competitive propositions from a UK perspective, investing in the areas of excellence. And I think that's key to actually providing something that is sustainable and moving beyond interventionist to fund, because we need that to grow. And we needed to intervene, particularly in venture capital in our past decades. We no longer need to intervene, in my view. We need to back the areas where we're strong and amplify and focus in those areas, and then create the right conditions for investment in that ecosystem.
All right. Thank you very much for your question. I don't know about everybody else, but it is immensely impressive how you're recalling every name and company and project that has clearly been put across your desk in the last number of years, as well as over the course of your career. So I know I personally take great comfort from that all of the work that you're doing in terms of understanding the economy, the sector, the challenges, not just in engineering, but across that. And, I think we probably all feel that we're in safe hands with you in place now, Jayne. So maybe just to kind of finish, maybe from me, thank you very much for the lecture this evening and for taking the time to answer the questions too. So coherently, after having also spoken for, the guts of 40 minutes beforehand too. Thank you to everyone for your questions this evening too. I'm sure we were all glad of the opportunity to get a bit closer to you again without sounding too much like a stalker and Buddy the Elf. But it has been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much. And I will now hand over to Dr. Ed Hardy, President of Engineers Ireland, for closing. So can I just, yep.
Dr. Brady, President and Vice-Chancellor, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure as President of Engineers Ireland to be here today. And it's with immense gratitude that I would like to thank Dr. Brady for her address, and I would like to extend our collective appreciation for an absolutely splendid event. Her leadership, vision, commitment to excellence, it's truly commendable, Jayne. And your insights today not only informed but inspired us. It's about underscoring the critical importance of your position, the position of engineers, and the contributions it can make to both the region and indeed the world. I especially like your comments about thinking big and innovation. I completely agree with that. And to never underestimate the power of hope and opportunity. And as well as outlining the ambitions of engineers and the pedigree here in Northern Ireland. It's an honour for me to share a connection with your predecessor, Sir David Stirling, through our mutual involvement with the Board of the Irish Times. And that connection has given me a glimpse into the importance of the role you now have And what I must really say is I'm delighted to see an engineer in that role. Innovation, as we all know, is the lifeblood of our profession, and it's driving us towards solutions that benefit society at large. And it's an area that I'm very excited about, and it's great to see it in abundance at events such as this, and in fact, the variety of companies you mentioned that I also know here in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. You know, you mentioned Canis, Brendan Mooney, know him very well, Andrew Woods in Catagen, and the late Brian Conlon in First Derivatives, and you mentioned all these great companies. And if we talk about the infrastructure, I know we've Seamus McCaig and Craig Concrete here, and you know, what I spoke about in my presidential address for Engineers Ireland was actually the symbiosis of engineering and entrepreneurship, and I think they actually work very, very well. And it was interesting to see the synergies about engineering being problem solvers and offering solutions. And it's great to see the role we as engineers have to play in society. I'd also like to to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our partner organisations, Queen's University Belfast Chief Executives Club and the IET, whose collaboration and support have been instrumental in making this event possible. Your involvement exemplifies the strength and unity within our engineering community. There was questions about competitive advantage, and I think the competitive advantage here in both Northern Ireland and Ireland as a whole is within the engineering community and the connections and the can-do attitude. And I think as a society we can all work very well together. It's not like that that we all don't know each other, and I think that is a big competitive advantage. I'd also like to specifically acknowledge the unwavering dedication of Frank Given, Chair of Engineers Ireland Northern Region, whose efforts have significantly contributed to the success of this gathering. And in closing, I'd like to extend my deepest appreciation to everyone involved in organising, participating and attending the event. The enthusiasm and engagement is what makes occasions like this both possible and successful. And I think we as engineers need to continue to strive for innovation, because it's through our creative and our collaborative efforts that we engineer a better future for all. Thank you very much.